to the Tiki Talk Show. I'm Ellie.
And I'm Ryley.
And today we're pleased to bring you another fantastic interview, this time with Mr. Ed Hamilton and our artist spotlight, Matt Strickland. Ed Hamilton is the owner of Hamilton Rums and one of the foremost importers of rum to the U.S. Matt Strickland, also known as Tikis by Savage Matt, creates fantastic tiki lamps that hang in commercial bars around the U.S. He also makes wood carvings and tiki jewelry as well.
Ed Hamilton is one of the most reputable and opinionated figures in the rum community today. We had a really fun time talking to him about what it was like first importing rum from the Caribbean islands to the U.S. that were not previously available from places like Martinique or Guadeloupe. We also talked to him a little bit about what the trends he's seeing in the rum world are, but then also what impact that the tiki revival has had on the world of rum. Ed imports a whole lot of different products, ranging from things that bartenders have requested all the way down to signature blend for bars and YouTubers. So stick around for this.
We all know that rum is the base of a great tiki cocktail. So when you have a great rum from a brand that you can rely on, whether it's at your home bar or when you're out drinking in a commercial bar, great rum is a great starting point. So enjoy this interview with Ed and stick around for Matt Strickland. Hi, and welcome back to the Tiki Talk Show. I'm Ellie.
And I'm Ryley.
And today we have the pleasure of sitting down with Mr. Ed Hamilton. How are you today?
Not bad.
Good. Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be familiar with you. Obviously, just how prolific Hamilton Rums are, and basically any tiki bar, rum bar, anywhere you're going to go. But you didn't get your start in rum. Originally, you had a whole different career beforehand. I know you've talked about it in a couple other shows. Would you mind just kind of talk about what you were doing before you got into the spirits world, your pre-rum background?
Yeah, well, I studied engineering and ended up becoming an engineer, and was told by my boss that I wasn't a good employee. And I never really thought about that. You know, you can be a good engineer, but a bad employee. I don't think I was a horrible employee. I was bringing in things, but I wasn't. I was bringing work to the company. They were profiting from my efforts. It wasn't they wanted to fire me, but they wanted me to conform or something. I'm not sure exactly. And I quit my job and did what I wanted to do, was to eventually go sailing, and ended up in Taiwan building yachts, and met a lot of people over there. That was exciting. I was young, and ended up sailing to Hong Kong and the Philippines and Singapore, and then worked on the oil rigs for a little bit. Well, 5 years. It's a little bit, 4 years, 4.5 years. And got back, made a little bit of money, came back to the States and bought a boat and went to the Caribbean for 20 years. And it didn't take too long to recognize that rum was a lot less expensive than beer. And, after a day of diving and working on boats and sailing and doing all the things you have to do, getting something to eat, uh, like I said, rum was cheaper than beer, or more cost effective than beer. And it didn't have to be chilled. And I didn't have a refrigerator all the time that could chill down a bunch of beer as fast as we could drink it. So things turned to rum, and there were good rums, and they were inexpensive. And I started kind of, well, I guess I was smuggling a little bit of rum, and people were asking me, well, why is this rum that you were drinking here so much less expensive than other things on this island? And I said, I don't really know, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to go visit some distilleries and find out. And one thing led to another, and I ended up writing a book about it and collecting about 175 different rums from 37 distilleries. Met a lot of really cool people, went to some great places, and one thing led to another. And about that time, the internet came along, and lo and behold, I became famous, I guess, or infamous, well known. I don't know about famous, but I became well known uh, around the world because I had a collection of information about rums, and people were starting to gain interest in it. This was back in the 90s, mid 90s, in the last century, 30 some years ago. But things grew from there. I realized that people really didn't care about what I was writing about rum. I was doing some magazine articles and this and that. But what people really wanted to know was where could they find rum? Where could they buy it? I could talk about some or write about some rum in Antigua or something, but where can I buy it? That's what people really wanted to know. And I started focusing on my efforts on that. And then one night, a guy in Chicago was drinking a tea punch from Martinique. Had some Martinique rum with me, as I usually did. And he says, "I've got to have this drink on my yacht." Okay. He says, "I'm going to give you the money to start an import company." And not being a businessman, I didn't really know better, but I learned this really wasn't rum or money. This was a letter of credit for debt, and he was going to have to pay it. Instead of putting up his cash, he put up somebody else's cash. And then a few years later, when he went bankrupt in his other business, he cashed out his obligations with his bank, and that included my little rum company. So I ended up buying it from him and uh, scrambling on my own and just listening to bartenders. And it was bartenders and bar owners and consumers. And people started asking for things like Jamaican black rum. Well, I didn't read the tiki books. I hadn't met Jeff Berry. I was on a boat in the Caribbean most of the time. But this concept of a Jamaican black rum, I thought, well, I know where to get it. I know where I can get a good rum and I can make it black with some caramel. If that's what you're looking for, I can do it. And it turned out there was a real demand for it. And today, the Jamaican black rum is one of my top five best-selling rums. So I've just been listening to bartenders and this resurgence of interest in the tiki drinks, and people are building home tiki bars. The pandemic was great for that. It was shocking to me how many people that I've met around the country have built, and are. I guess a home tiki bar is never finished, so they're building their
Yeah.
tiki bars. It's a little bit like a boat. Boat's never finished. There's always something to do, something to fix,
Yeah.
something to improve. And the home tiki bar is one of those things. It's a project in progress, and
Yeah.
people are asking for more rums, and so I knew where to get them and knew where to get good rum, and had the infrastructure, and I guess I was stupid enough to go do it. So here I am.
But you're talking about good rum, and so this next question revolves around a great rum, and or it is my favorite. But you started out importing initially. Was that Nissan? You started importing Nissan originally, right?
Yeah, it was
Uh,
Nissan and La Favorite. And the reason I chose those two initially, as soon as I realized that I was going to have to go back to the islands and actually do some work and put together a company and all these things, kind of like going to work, kind of like a job. I immediately went to Nissan and La Favorite because they were the last two family owned companies on the island. And in both of those companies, there was one man that I had known for a dozen years by then who was responsible for everything. And I like dealing with people that are responsible. There's no question about who's responsible, or if there's going to be if I've got a question, I can go to one person. It isn't, oh, well, you got to go see this guy or this guy or this guy or this woman or that person. There's one person. He owns the company. So that made it easy from that standpoint. The other was that both of these were quality products that I loved and I believed in them. And Nissan has been fantastic to work with. La Favorite has been challenging. Uh, the regulations in Martinique almost put them out of business a number of years ago, but they've survived. And something that I'm reminded of regularly is that I was going to say 50 years ago, a little more than that, 60, 70 years ago, there were many distilleries on Martinique. And I want to say 1935 or so, there were something like 70 distilleries on the island. Today there's half a dozen. So if things continue, unless they build a lot more new distilleries, somebody's going to fold. And it's kind of like, who's the last person at the poker table? Who's going to run out of money? And being the smallest, La Favorite is kind of on the chopping block all the time. But they're continuing to make good products. And we're still in business. So I'm happy to be working with them.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'm happy that you're still they're still capable of being able to produce, because I mean, I think between Nissan and La Favorite, I must have a dozen different varieties in my bar at the moment. So big fan of that. When was that when you started importing into the US from Martinique?
Well, I got my license in 2003, and then it took 19 months to
Oh,
get the
wow.
first bottle of rum off the island. And I had no idea how hard it was going to be. There were a lot of factors that led into that. One of them was labels, getting labels, the reluctance of the distilleries, even though they wanted to import to the US, they were a little shy. They weren't really sure if I was going to be able to do it. And finally, I said, look, guys, nobody understands Rhum Agricole better than I do.
Mhm.
Nobody in the US. So you're talking to somebody, and Nissan was talking to a family friend that had a beer distribution company in Miami. And I said, they're not going to be able to distribute Rhum Agricole anywhere other than South Florida. I'm going to do it all over the country. I was kind of based in Chicago back then, or when I came back to the States, that's where I landed. I said, I'm going to take this nationwide. And they said, oh, okay. And finally, it came down to who understands this product, who's going to be able to go out and talk about it. And they said, yeah, you're right. And then there was the issue of labels. And finally, they were getting labels out of Barbados. And it was a company that was going to print them there. They were trying to get other business in Martinique for their label company in Barbados. I think it was Caribbean Label Crafters, if I recall correctly. Don't want to get their name wrong. But finally, they wanted me to introduce them to other people because I knew every distiller in the whole island chain. And finally, they weren't delivering, and I sent them an email and I said, look, or I went to La Favorite and I said, if I don't have labels by next week to ship, cancel the order. Two guys showed up a couple of days later with boxes of labels, suitcases full of labels. And they weren't real happy with me, but we got everything bottled and got it shipped off. So my goal there was to get it into the U.S. market by January, and I just couldn't see another delay. That was the frustration. It had been months, more than a year, and then I said, "We've got to get this going." So the first bottles landed in December of 2004, and the first sales were January 2005.
Wow.
So I'm just curious. At that time, it seems like a lot of the rum that was entering the U.S. market at that point, at least majority, was probably from places like Puerto Rico or Panama. Do you remember any initial reactions or kind of the appetite for Rhum Agricole? Because going from something like Spanish heritage to all of a sudden Rhum Agricole is a big jump.
Yeah, there was one person that knew what it was in San Francisco, Thad Vogler, and he knew what it was. He hadn't tasted it, I don't believe, at that point. But yeah, he understood it, and then other people were curious. And once they tasted it, so before I actually got commercial quantities in, I would come back to the States every couple of years, and I'd been doing this for years before. I'd bring a few bottles with me when I'd come to the States. I'd come for 2 or 3 weeks a year, and I would ask people, "Do you want a drink?" I'd be around with bartenders and different people, and I'd been asked to do other promotions for other rum companies and such. So I was working in around the industry, but I wasn't in it. but I was surrounded with bartenders and people that were influential. I'd say, does anybody want a drink? Well, of course, everybody wants a drink. They're bartenders and industry people. And here's this crazy guy from a sailboat in the Caribbean. He's got a bottle of rum we've never heard of, never tried. So I'd make him a tea punch. If they asked for and drank the second bottle, or the second drink, not the second bottle, second drink, I made a mental note that that was a plus. If they didn't ask for the second drink, they didn't get one. I'll ask if you want one drink. But if people ask me for a second one, I'd make them one. And about 95% of the people asked for and drank the second drink. And I said, okay, I can make this work. But a tea punch is not something that's really taken off in bar cocktails. There's a few people that are doing it, trying it. Unfortunately, I ran out of the sugarcane syrup, and that's a challenge I'm faced with right now. But that rum works well in a daiquiri. It's strong. You got to be careful. It's 100 proof. It's not 80 proof. So it's a little bit challenging there. But people tried it. They liked it. And starting in San Francisco actually was the best thing I could have done because things were available in San Francisco before they were available in New York. Now, they were also available in Chicago, but that took a little longer because the distributor was playing some games with me. He was trying to import another rum and get all my pricing and all my details and all that. And that didn't end well for him, but that's another story. But New York had heard about what was going on in San Francisco. New York bartenders did, and it was winter, January. I didn't want to go to New York in the winter,
Right.
but as it turned out, people were very interested in New York when I finally got it there. And with the label registrations, it took about 2 months to get the labels available. So it was actually probably April, end of April, before Rhum Agricole was available in New York. And by then it had warmed up. New York bartenders were very anxious to see, and they kind of followed what was going on in San Francisco. Along the same lines, San Francisco didn't give a damn what went on in New York. They were doing their own thing. And you've traveled around the country, San Francisco is much more food and drink oriented. New York's got more kinds and blah, blah, blah. But San Francisco is close to the Central Valley of California and the wine country, and there's a lot more emphasis on quality, not just quantity. So that's how it got started.
So you mentioned that, your Hamilton line of rums is marketed a bit towards bartenders. How do you go about then listening to those bartenders and what they're looking for and developing a new rum to add to your collection?
Yeah, I don't want to say it's marketed towards bartenders. They were the market. I make it available to distributors, and it's what people are asking for. You're probably familiar with the Breezeway blend. That was one that came after the White Stash. White Stash was one that bartenders were asking me for 2 years for a good white rum. And I said, no, I don't want to do another rum. It was going to be involved. I had to buy a bunch of rum, and it's a big investment. I had to buy rum, I had to get a new label, and it was only going to be in liter bottles. So I did that finally. Finally, I tasted all the white rums that are available out there, and I said, I know of one that's better than all these. Better being doesn't have any sugar in it. It doesn't have any flavoring added to it or glycerin. It finishes nice. It's got some rum flavor, some tropical fruit notes, and it smells nice out of the bottle. It doesn't have acetone notes in the bottle or coming off the aroma. When people are asking me for a new rum, like the Breezeway blend, I did that because the Spike was using something that I couldn't stand to drink. It wasn't actually rum. It was a flavored wine. masquerading as rum. It says rum on the bottle, so it's got to be rum, right? Who knows the difference? Rum was also supposed to taste like rum, according to the TTB, and this didn't have any of the attributes of it. But I blended some things, and he said, "Okay, great, let's market it." Well, you market it. You put it on your website or put it on your YouTube channel, and if people ask for it, then I'll do it. And the way we got people to ask for it was show them a picture of the bottle, give them a list of distributors, and then the distributor can ask, or the retailer can ask the distributor for it. The distributor will ask me, and then I'll sell it to them. I don't run around the country every time I have a new product and tell all my distributors, "Hey, I got a new rum," because their predictable answer would be, "Great. Nobody's asked for it. When somebody asks for it, we'll let you know." That's how it works. So if there's a big enough demand, I'll do it and make it available, and the word of mouth spreads. And there are people that are monitoring the TTB Cola website to look for new rum brands that have been registered. I'll have one out next month, probably next month. But it takes time between you get the cola approval and you actually get it in the bottle. You've got to print the labels. You don't want to do that till you got a cola approval. Then you got to schedule bottling. You got to get the label shipped to the bottler. Then you got to schedule bottling. Then you got to ship it to a warehouse. Then the distributor has to pick it up. So there's a time lag here. But I work with bars and like False Idol asked me for a 151 and they wanted their own False Idol. I said, okay. Well, they wanted something that had a little bit bigger flavor profile than the Demerara. So I added some aged Jamaican rum to it. And predictably, they use it in a lot of their drinks. It says False Idol on it. So they like that. It goes into their drinks. Lost Voyage was one that Robert and Ying came to me and said, "We want a special rum for our bar." And fortunately, that one's going pretty well. They're actually up for a James Beard Award. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but they're in the quarterfinals. So, those kind of things help market my whole product line. So I don't do it just for any old bar that comes to me and says we want our own label. It just isn't economical to do that. It's a pain in the ass. You've got to, and I can't afford to sit on a bunch of inventory, and I've got to bottle 75 to 100 cases to make it worthwhile to bottle it. And then I'm sitting on it for a year. So unless a bar is going to be going through it, or there is a secondary market, like White Stash sells in probably 25 states right now. White Stash and Breezeway blend. False Idols blend sells in probably 10 states. And when distributors call me and say, "Hey, is this available?" Go, "Sure." All you have to do is ask for it. Go on my website, see but what happens is bartenders ask for it or consumers ask for it. And then they go to a liquor store and the liquor store asks for it. That's a much more effective, cost-effective way to market products than coming out with something new and claiming it's a new barrel pick or something, some overpriced thing that, it's limited supply. You better grab it now.
Yeah.
So rum is obviously the primary alcohol in most tiki cocktails, and we've been going through a really big tiki revival and in general just a cocktail revival and revolution. How have those just bar culture resurgences kind of changed people's view on rum?
Well, it's interesting to me that has certainly helped the rum industry. The other thing that's helped the rum industry is the price of whiskey. People have tasted a bunch of whiskeys and then they go, "Gee, this is kind of expensive. What other brown spirits might I like? Oh, there's rum over here." And then in better bars, you can get things like my Navy strength rum. Have you ever had an old fashioned with Navy strength rum? It's good.
I'll have to check that out.
I've never had anybody make an old fashioned with my Navy strength rum that didn't like it.
Yeah.
And it's considerably less expensive than a good bottle of bourbon or whiskey.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, the tiki bars, um, this time around, and this is, as you know, the second generation of tiki bars, maybe the third generation. But the reason a lot of tiki bars failed 30 years ago, 25 years ago, was that the drinks sucked.
Mhm.
They were too sweet. The rums that they were using weren't very good. And in their defense, there weren't a lot of rums available. A lot of the rums that we consider standard today, Santa Teresa, El Dorado, um, those two come to mind first. But those two, they weren't even in the U.S. in 2000. Now, Santa
Yeah.
Teresa tried a little bit in '99, but El Dorado didn't come in until 2001. Florida Cana didn't enter the U.S. market till after 2000. So a number of the rums that we consider to be standards today, Abuelo from Panama didn't come in until after 2000. So before 2000, it's only 25 years ago, there weren't a lot of rums. In 1997, in the biggest liquor store in America, which was Sam's in Chicago at that time, there were 7 rums on the shelf. That was it. So when we see 30, 40 rums today on a liquor store shelf, we go, oh my God, it's everywhere. Well, that's only in the last 25 years. And then if you look at how many of those rums are what I consider to be authentic rums or
Mhm.
from reputable importers. Do they tell you which distillery they came from? Where did it come from? How was it made? Is there added flavoring? And does it say anything other than Caribbean rum?
Mhm.
Yeah.
What do you do when you pick up a bottle of rum and it says Caribbean rum? What do you do? Go, oh my God, I haven't had this before. I got to taste it. Or you go, well, wait, maybe somebody else will have that at a party someday. And in the meantime, I don't need to spend any money on that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So kind
Yeah.
of in the same vein, like Rums has traditionally not been as widely respected as whiskey by like modern Americans. And I feel like that's definitely been changing recently. Do you get like the same impression?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And there's two things going on there. One is there are a lot of whiskeys that come from MGPI in Indiana, and people don't talk about it, where it came from, and they've got their own special barrel or some story about it. So the credibility of the whiskey market is slipping a little bit. Um, but people are interested in trying more rums. But I do see more and more rums coming to the market every month that I look at and I go, you got to be kidding me. Why are you spending money on this?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and people are, in their defense, they're looking to build it up real quick and sell the brand.
Yeah.
And, I see things like Bumbu.
Ugh.
They were
Not
sued
a fan of
for,
that.
no, they were sued for having too much sugar in it. There's a lot of them that we know of. Zaccapa's another one's got a lot of sugar in it, but that one wasn't around until 2002, something like that.
Yeah.
There were very limited amounts of it came into the country before 2000, but it wasn't until the early 2000s, 2005, 2006, that Diageo got involved in it, that it really started getting known. But there are a number of rums that have egregious amounts of sugar and flavoring in them. And the TTB doesn't have the resources to check and monitor all this stuff. And, when I talk to them, they say, well, send them a letter. If they don't respond, then we'll look into it. And a number of people have responded. I've written a few letters. I'm not the rum police, but somebody's got to at least talk to people that are doing naughty things.
Yeah.
and there's a few labels that have been changed. Kirk and Sweeney changed their label. You don't see a 15-year-old Kirk and Sweeney, which
Hmm.
from day one, retailers showed it to me and said, "Well, it's not 15 years old." I said, "So why it's on your shelf? Why is it on your shelf? You're
Mm-hmm.
just
Yeah.
another bullshit liquor store selling some crap that you know is a lie." Well,
Right.
well, company had a lot of money behind it, and they were pushing it through distribution, and um, we'll see what happens. Uh, Distribution is changing considerably. The second biggest distributor in California is closing their doors September 2nd,
Wow.
and
Wow.
we'll see how that impacts the industry. There's a lot of brands scrambling right now.
I bet.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I think yeah, when it comes to the rum world, at least from a consumer perspective, I've read quite a bit on it and I've done my research and tried quite a bit. There's still definitely things I'll see that turns me off immediately. The term up to age statement when it's written in the same color as the background, or the one that always kind of gets me is Solera, to stuff like that. The very big over promises and under delivers. But it kind of on the flip side of that, as some of the Caribbean island distilleries get a little bit more control over their product of what they choose to sell to independent bottlers or to what to hold on to, there have been rum companies similar to like Worthy Park or um, uh, Chairman's Reserve who've now decided to hold on to some of their rum for specific single cask options or just specialty options in general. Do you view any of these trends as a possible impact that they're holding on to some of the more, uh, I don't know, the different options available to their distillery, not selling them to IBs?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea for them. Worthy Park's an interesting one to me. I've been working with them more than 10 years. And initially, they had sold their rum to a New Jersey beer distributor, sold a couple of containers to them, and it didn't go well for them. And then they started their own brand. They rebranded it, and they're doing their own thing now. And when I see a Worthy Park product on the shelf, I know that it's a legitimate product. Now, it may not be exactly what I'm looking for, but it's a legitimate product. It's not going to be full of flavoring and other stuff that uh, really shouldn't be in there. Uh,
Mhm.
Other distilleries are doing other things. Uh, I see a couple of distilleries. You mentioned Chairman's Reserve, St. Lucia Distillers Limited. I used to
Mhm.
buy barrels from them before it was sold, and now they're doing some of their own things. Um, I wish that they would do, I wish all the distilleries that put out their own single cask would understand the market a little better. Um, but all too often, these are made by marketing people that aren't in the US market. They're not in direct touch with consumers, and they're looking at trends and
Hmm.
saying, we got to do this, we got to do that. So, I just let other people do what they want to do, and I keep my head down and concentrate on not running out of rum, which eh, for me, that's the biggest part of the success of my business, is not, don't run out. If you run out,
Yeah.
you're out of business.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and that takes a lot of time. That's what I was doing while you were waiting on me for this podcast.
I think right now, at least again, this is my outside perspective. I'm not in the industry in any way, but I mean, I've heard on different podcasts like the Rumcast, people in the industry talking about premiumization. We're talking about whiskey, of how kind of in the last couple of years, whiskey prices start skyrocketing because of limited options, limited availability, and things like that. I know there is at least some type of concern about that, at least from the consumer basis, that rum prices are likely to fluctuate or things could become more scarce or things like that. Do you view any trends like that, or maybe these very specific limited options as becoming more prevalent in the near future compared to where they were a couple of years ago in rum?
Yeah, there's a limited amount of supply. That's going to change things a little bit, and prices are going up. I'll tell you, I was calculating just the box. and I buy the cheapest boxes I can. I don't know if you've seen the case boxes. They're a white box, a nondescript white box, no printing on them or anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's gone up about 45 cents a box, which doesn't sound like a lot, but by the time it goes through the whole chain, that's $1 a case. Well, every dollar counts. Uh, the capsules, the little plastic pieces that go on top of the bottle that shrunk wrapped it so you can tell that it hadn't been opened before, that's gone up. It's not just the rum. The paper that the labels are printed on has gone up. The bottles have gone up. I use imported bottles because the American glass industry doesn't produce the bottles that I use. And when I go to American producers, they want to sell me these bottles with about that much glass at the bottom, and they tell me it looks premium. Well, it's a heavy bottle that costs more for freight and shipping and all these other things, and the bottle's more expensive. Um, so all the other ingredients and the rum, and now with our wonderful president's beautiful tariffs, I just paid $14,800 last week for tariffs, and I'll probably pay another 12,000, 15,000 next month on another container that's coming in. And who's going to pay that cost? I mean, I pay it. The distillery doesn't pay it. A foreign government doesn't pay it. And so in order to stay in business, what do I have to do? I've got to raise my prices to the distributors. I can't eat it all or I'll go out of business. So
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, expect some price increases, but I have full confidence that by the end of the year, Trump's going to bring prices down on everything, and the world's going to be wonderful and beautiful again.
Nice thought.
Yeah, we can hope. And so you're mentioning that things like bottles down the Caribbean, there's been issues with that. Like you said, everything's getting more expensive. And so we talked about the rum as a finished product. But if we take a step back into sugar production, I know this has made news recently. It's no surprise to anyone that sugar production now is a very, very efficient process, leaving very little molasses byproduct left over in the case where they're going to be using molasses. Simultaneously, there's been a shift to some of the new countries, or new origins. Places like India is entering the market, Fiji, or a little bit more of the Australian options. Do you think in the wide world of rum, there'll be a shift slowly away to incorporate these new countries, while the Caribbean rum distillers and manufacturers kind of figure out what their future looks like, as just based on what we're seeing entering the market?
Yeah, it's going to be hard for the other countries to compete. Rum's been made in the Caribbean for 350 years. And when you mentioned Fiji, well, they've been making rum for a while, and they make some good rum. The cost of transportation from Fiji to the US is ridiculous. Australia, there's some guys in Australia that just put out a big new plant. I've seen pictures of it. It's huge.
Yeah.
They're looking at very efficient sugar manufacturing in Australia, then using the molasses making rum. The rum is primarily a light rum, lighter rum. In India, they're making a lot of sugarcane spirits. They have, and their whiskey is basically a high proof, clean distillate from molasses. Then they make some whiskey, add it, and it's blended. They have very few straight whiskeys in India. The Indian rums that I've tasted would not compete with American rum. Yeah, it's different. Yeah, okay. And there's collectors want to try everything, and you'll sell a few bottles, but I don't know of anyone that's told me that they've found Indian rums that were so good they now have a place in their home tiki bar or on their shelf. Yeah, they're in their collections, but they're not. I haven't seen anything yet that's replaced Caribbean rum in bars or even home bars yet.
No, I think that's definitely fair. I was curious from the trends perspective in the industry, and I do think in other respects to American rum. Now it's in the conversation a little bit out for places like in Hawaii or in Louisiana. It is slowly, other areas are coming out, but it's just not progressed far enough into, or maybe not progressed, but not what people are traditionally looking for to replace their Caribbean rums.
Yeah,
Which,
and in Hawaii, they're buying rum and bottling it in Hawaii, and so it's Hawaiian rum. It's made in Hawaii or blended in Hawaii. But yeah, I know of a couple of examples there where people took a lot of money and went there and started something and then realized it wasn't sustainable and wasn't competitive with what is available in the US market. So
Mhm.
it's a tough thing. We can also expect transportation costs to go up. I know
Yeah.
mine have. I don't see any reason why it's going to go down. Maybe it will. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Uh, I'm wrong about a lot of things, but so far I've been lucky enough to be able to source good rums from good distilleries and blend something that people want.
Yeah. One of the things I'm curious about, and this is just kind of just an easy question as far as something that you prefer. So I know you're not a tiki guy, but you have been around rum. You know enough of rum history. Is there anything that's currently not being produced or being produced in very, very small quantities that you'd like to see a bigger resurgence in, or just a complete revival of if it's no longer being produced?
Yeah, there's some aged Jamaican rums that I wish that someone had had the foresight to age years ago. And I know that there is some rum being aged. I bought some barrels and I'm aging stuff in Jamaica. Um, but it's going to be years before that's ready to be bottled and come back to the market.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate in the meantime that some people are bottling some things claiming it's Jamaican rum that's got very high ester counts that aren't actually rum. And when you start using muck vats and
Hmm.
bananas and other fruits in the production, it's no longer rum.
Yeah.
And so hopefully that'll get phased out. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Fair enough. So, one more quick question. So, for a lot of this interview and most of our shows, we're on the tiki side. That's what the show is. But we've been talking a lot about rum. For people who want to learn more about not just mixing rums or anything like that, but really want to get into uh, deeper into the rum world, do you have anything that people should look into to learn from, whether that's books, podcast, documentary, anything that's either helped you or you would recommend?
Boy, I wish I could recommend my Ministry of Rum website, but that got deprecated last weekend.
Oh
The
no.
code went from PHP 4 to PHP 8, and unfortunately, that's offline right now. It's going to be coming back hopefully in another month or so. But um, yeah, I honestly don't know of resources, and I know this is a horrible answer for your viewers and listeners. I don't have time to read the books that people are putting out.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's fair.
and I usually pick up a book if I'm sent all kinds of things. And usually by about page 4, I read something that I just can't stomach and I put the book down.
Yeah,
Well, I,
that's
I did 10 years of serious research at distilleries in the islands, and I
right.
visited the libraries in all the islands and uh, read old histories and things. And then when I read something that I just know is not true, I go, come on, you got to be kidding me. Uh,
Yeah.
we can do better than this. Um, yeah, I wish there were better resources. Uh, I've been asked to write another book, and I don't have a lot of free time. So maybe if I retire, I would have time to do that.
Yeah.
But then I'd be out of rum, and I don't want to run out of rum. It's kind of a self-defeating deal here. If I quit doing this and retire, then I'm going to run out of rum. And then I'd have time to write a book about rum.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would say talk to as many people as you can, try as many different rums as you can, but understand that just because it says rum on the bottle, there's a lot of things that can go on there. Look for sugar. Uh, Train yourself in tasting and spend some time getting to know the aroma of a spirit. Does it smell like rum? And then does the initial taste follow that initial aroma? And then what is the body like? And then the finish. And is it a nice harmony or is there any disconnects in there? Does it finish nicely? Is it something that invites you to take another sip? I
Mhm.
take a sip and then put it at arm's length and lean back in my chair. And well, does it invite me to take another sip or do I want to drink some water and be done with it? I'll usually take a couple of sips just to confirm my first impression. And, if I like it, I'll take the third and fourth sip. But don't believe that just because it says rum on the bottle, that it's something that you should be enamored with. And, as we get more into rum and as we age, our tastes change. Um,
Hmm.
and so some things that I didn't have a big uh, appreciation for years and years ago, I've come around. The first time I tasted old agricole, I thought it tasted like wood. And
Hmm.
I thought, hmm. And then I found, oh, well, there's better ones. And so, don't generalize that, oh, it's Martinique rum. I've had it. Uh,
Yeah.
well, if you haven't tasted old Nissan rum, then you haven't tasted a lot of what aged rum agricole can be. Uh,
Mhm.
so don't be afraid to try different things. Keep notes, keep a diary. I think a lot of people forget that when they're trying to educate themselves. And then after a while, go back and look at your notes and look at some of those things. One of the small pleasures I get is doing rum tastings with people, and particularly people that I meet that, oh, we've got this favorite rum, and it's just and I said, "Oh yeah, that's full of sugar. I know why you like that. Do you drink whiskey? Oh yeah, I love whiskey. But I really found this rum." And I said, "Well, you know, how much of it can you drink? You drink half an ounce of? Oh yeah, after dinner or after dessert. Well, it's so sweet. That's why." And then I'll have them make an old fashioned with my Navy strength rum, and they go, "Wow." I said, "Yeah, that's a good drink, and there's no sugar in that rum, but you probably wouldn't like it." And then they taste it straight and go, "Oh yeah, that's like a whiskey. Oh yeah, okay. Well, it's aged in whiskey barrels."
Mhm.
Yeah.
And as things age, the flavors tend to uh, coalesce around certain flavors of the barrel and aged spirits. When I first started bringing in aged Martinique rum, Dale DeGroff and I met, and he tasted the Nissan Reserve, and he said, "Oh, Ed, I didn't know you were bringing in cognac. When did that start?" No, Dale, it's rum. It's aged rum. So
Yeah.
don't be afraid to explore, but keep an open mind. Just because you taste one product from XYZ country, don't think you know what that country's rum tastes like.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to sit with and talk with you.
Yeah. We greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity. All the best.
Thank
All right.
you.
Aloha, everyone.
Thanks again for Mr. Ed Hamilton for coming on our show. We appreciate your time. We hope that you all enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. We said in the beginning, Ed is one of the foremost experts on rum, and we really hope that you learned something throughout this interview. For our artist spotlight this week, we have Mr. Matt Strickland.
Matt has his very own way of constructing and building tiki lamps that hang in commercial and home bar spaces across the U.S. He started this project in the early 2000s, and post-COVID has branched out into both freestanding and wall-hanging tiki carvings. He uses a chainsaw and does some of that burn and scrape wood method that gives that Whitco-esque design that we all know and love. Even beyond the wood carvings, Matt has taken to creating resin tiki jewelry, and we've been the proud recipients of a few of these fantastic pieces.
Yeah, thanks, Matt, for sending those out. We really appreciate it. They are fantastic. They're super cool, and we're wearing them right now as we're recording this. If any of you out there have not seen any of Matt's work, go ahead and hop on Instagram. Check out Tikis by Savage Matt if you want to see the freestanding tikis, if you want to see the lamps and everything. But if you want to see one of his necklaces, go ahead and hop back to our episode with Christy White, aka Tiki Kaliki, and you're going to be seeing her wear one of Matt's necklaces. But in the meantime, here's Matt.
Aloha, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Tiki Talk Show. I'm Ryley.
And I'm Ellie.
And today we're sitting down with Mr. Matt Strickland. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Great, thank you.
Could you introduce yourself and then not only of the different art forms that you do, but then also how you found your way into the tiki scene?
Sure. I go by Tikis by Savage Matt. I started just making lamps it must have been about 2005, 2006. And I did it for a while. Then I took a break. And then during COVID, I got reinvigorated to kind of hop back into it. And during that time period, I also decided that I wanted to start carving, which I'd never tried before, never had any inclination to do. And it took me a while to get better at it. So I'm still improving, I think. But, people are buying my stuff. So I'm not going to say, it's terrible, but I'm not 100% where I want to be yet. I'm sure everybody's the same way. I also make some jewelry. I'm wearing, I don't know if you can see this. I have this.
I love those.
Yeah. So yeah, if you need one, let me know. And so far that's it. So just the lamps, the carvings. I make wall hangings and freestanding carvings, and then jewelry, necklaces. I made some brooches. They didn't. People are kind of confused by that. I think, you know what I mean. They're like, what do I want to put this big pin of a tiki head on my jacket or shirt? But hopefully it'll catch on. And then I make earrings too. So a lot of resin carving. Like I said, I really got into it around COVID, but I've been into tiki probably since the mid 90s or earlier 90s. I mean, I knew what it was in the 80s. I'm 56 years old, but I was into punk rock in like the mid to late 80s. And then it kind of got into the rockabilly scene, which they used to call that the punk rock retirement plan. And now into tiki, which is now the rockabilly retirement plan. So I played in a rockabilly band called the High Q's from like 2002 to about 2022 is the last time we played. So very cool. So that's it really. I mean, I've had a tiki tattooed on me since 1996. So
wow.
That says anything. And I built a home bar in 2004, which it's kind of in the middle of like, it's kind of a lot of stuff is in there and I need to redo it. We got started on it over Memorial Day. It's like this big vaulted stairwell that goes downstairs. Took everything out of there, repainted it, completely decorated it only with tiki stuff. And then, I need to paint the ceiling down there. It's an acoustic tile ceiling. It's white and I'm like so sick of it. So I've got like this burnt orange paint. I'm going to paint it. And I got tons of this tappa cloth to try to hang up. And
yeah,
so we'll see what happens, see where it goes from there.
Very
yeah,
cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you do quite a few different styles of artwork. You started out with the lamps and transitioned to the other things. What got you into the lamp building originally?
Well, we were having this show every year at this place called Chin's, and it's in Livonia. It's really literally about a mile or so from my house. And I thought, well, I'll just try my hand at it. So I just made like a lot of really simple drum lamps. There was no resin involved or any of that stuff. And obviously when I got back into it, 2020 or 2021, it's progressed quite a bit, the whole style and everything everyone does. So I try to make my own style of lamps. I have like a really kind of a proprietary methodology of building the lamp. A lot of the ones that I do with like the cutouts on the sides, they're built with really, there's no frame inside of it. So if somebody copied me, I would definitely know that they had copied exactly what I was doing. So I could show you if you were here, I could show you one of the lamps and how it's built on the inside. So I've had a few people come to my booth and they're looking inside and I'm like, hey, you could buy that if you want.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna try to copy my build, then no, don't look, please.
Right.
So
So after you started with the lamps, you then said that you transitioned to doing a lot of the wood carving stuff.
Yeah. So what happened was we went down to this market, and I have to say, and I don't know where the guy was from, but it was a collection of the worst carvings I'd ever seen in my life. And I thought, and he was bragging about how somebody had decorated their entire tiki room with this stuff, and I was like, I feel terrible for that person. And I said, I know that I could do better. So,
Yeah.
I mean, my first attempt at carving was, I had like the, a Craftsman chainsaw. It was really big, and I was getting wood off the side of the road, and it was oak, and it was like, you'd carve for a while and it would dull the chainsaw blades, so after it took me a while to figure out, and then I figured out you could go to like Menards and buy like dimensional wood and, make wall hangings out of that. So you draw it on there and cut it out. So it just kind of progressed from there. Now I've got, like, if I could show you, I've got like, I went up north, and I did 2 buys recently. One was on the west side of the state, and I bought a bunch of sort of not real big logs, but they're, like 6 or 7 feet, and they're maybe like 8 to 10 inches around. And then I bought some really big logs up north and more dimensional lumber. So now I have like a lot of stuff stacked up. So now I need to get busy carving. So I have a lot of lamps built right now for the next couple of shows. I've got this thing at the Tiki Inferno next weekend. If anybody's close to Michigan, it's well worth the trip. There's going to be like probably 15, 20 vendors there, bands. There's a pinup contest, cars. There's going to be food trucks and drinks and everything. So I know you guys are kind of far, but
Right.
if you had time to pre-plan, it would be worth it to come out.
That would be super fun.
And then I'm going to be at Makahiki in Indianapolis in September. I know that there hasn't been much going on about that. I think there's been some turmoil in that, in the event, but it's still going to happen. So.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'm kind of curious, when you say that you have kind of your own proprietary style where you don't have certain things inside your lamps, is that something that you set out to do, or is that something you just figured out and ended up working for you, and you looked around to realize that nobody else is doing it this way?
The second. So I started doing this, and I realized nobody else is doing it that way. So, it's not something I will tell you on here, but I know a lot of people are like, they build the entire frame out, you know what I mean? But
yeah.
I'm putting it together, and obviously, I mean, it's not like there's any kind of weight or pressure on it. Nobody's sitting on it. It's not like it's going to, there's any kind of risk, but I mean, it's my stuff is solidly put together. So, but it's different. Like, not every lamp, but a lot of the lamps I build are completely different than the way everyone else would build a lamp.
Yeah.
So, like my shell lamp is like the typical shell lamp, it's got the, hardware cloth around it, and you wire the shells to it, and etc. But I used to own a few. I used to have a few lamps that were from the Kahiki. This is probably early 2000. Yeah, it was early 2000s. I had to sell a lot of stuff during the recession, in 2008. So I kind of lost a lot of my tiki collection during that. It's just my wife had lost her job, and it's it was kind of a bummer. I won't dwell on it too much, but that's how I kind of like, oh, that's how that's built, so that's how some of those things but every day is a learning experience. I always try to do something different, try to make a new design or a different design or something slightly different. So everything that I make is always, similar, but not exactly the same. I always try to make something slightly different on it. So you're not making the same thing twice.
Yeah.
I used to have a business where I was making leather studded belts. They were more, targeted towards like the rockabilly crowd, and it was always, everybody wanted the same thing. So instead of, of an artistic pursuit, it was more like a, like a craft, or, like something that was the same over and over again. And it just started to wear me out. So I do a little bit of that still, but not much. Just a tiny small amount. Yeah.
You were saying that you do both the freestanding carvings and the more wall hanging stuff. Is there one that you prefer over the other, or?
I like both. Both are different. You know what I mean? Because when you do the wall hanging is it's sort of 3-dimensional, I guess, but it's not as 3-dimensional as a freestanding carving. So with the freestanding carving, I did one yesterday. I made like a moe for my next show, and I spent a lot of the time I'm spending shaping the log to the shape that I want it to be in. I mean, you could just take a round log or whatever shape the log is, because logs, believe it or not, aren't exactly round most of the time. They have branches and things sticking off. So I spent a lot of time like shaping it and making. I like to make them flat on the backside. It just seems to me then you can fit it in to the wall better or fit into a space better. And then you get that more sideways view of it too. So yeah, I do like both. I mean, it is more taxing to do the freestanding carvings, like the statues, than it is to do the wall hangings.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, the wall hanging, you get a background, and so you can paint it or add some design to it. So you got a little bit more artistic freedom. Kind of make it a little more fancy, if you want to say.
Yeah. I'm curious for anyone that's watching on YouTube right now. We see something peeking over your shoulder right now. Is that something you're recently carving, or something back
What
there?
are we looking at over here?
Yeah.
Yeah. The tiki. Yeah, right there. Is that?
This way?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that.
Yeah, that
that's
one,
just that's a mask. That was
Okay.
that's probably from early 2000s. There's 3 of them up there.
Wow.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
That just shields my air conditioner unit, so you don't see it. So
That's really
yeah,
cool.
those were I'm gonna say they were, I don't know who made them, but they were originally kind of Oceanic Arts designs, and you used to be able to buy them on eBay, and they're just like a plastic blow mold almost.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so I just have them up there. They've been there forever. There's a few things out here that are, I don't know if you can see these. Those
Yeah.
are kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
early things that I made, probably like 2020. Just
You
stuff
made
that I-
those?
Yeah, on the wall. Yeah, they're just,
Oh, okay.
practice kind of stuff, and I have other better things, obviously, but
That's
now I'm
fun.
just basically sold most of my later stuff, so I don't have a
Mhm.
lot. I have a lot of lamps downstairs in the basement, but I have no big carvings other than one I'm just working on right now. So
Fair enough.
So with all of the lamps and the carvings and now the jewelry that you're making, is there somewhere specifically that you like draw inspiration from, or like a collection of things that you look to?
I like vintage style stuff. You know what I mean? I like I like tiki. You know what I mean? I'm not
Yeah.
going to knock anybody. There's room for every kind of style, but I like stuff that kind of looks vintage. I mean, I guess that comes from I've been a collector of vintage clothing and vintage furniture. All the furniture in our tiki room is Haywood Wakefield Ashcraft, so it's all
Wow.
from the 1950s, and
Mhm.
almost all the furniture in our house is Haywood Wakefield. So we have a lot of that. I have a Whitco bar, several Whitco pieces.
Mhm.
So I've always been kind of like that's one of the things I really like to do, is to hunt for things.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, I wanted to make stuff that kind of looked like, oh, hey, is that old or is that new, or is. And when we did this thing a few weeks ago, the Tiki Underground flea market, a lot of people asked me where I got all this stuff, and I said, "What do you mean?" They go, "Well, where did you find it all?" I said, "Oh, I made it." They're like, "You made all this stuff?" And I said, "It's not old." And I said, "No, I made it all. Trust me."
That must have been a great
Yeah,
compliment.
it was
Yeah,
but that's more of a pedestrian type of a market. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's like some tiki people there, and then there's a lot of people that are just like if you were doing an art fair kind of show. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're always like, "Wow, where'd you find all this stuff?" I'm always like, "Yeah, I made it." They're like, "We made all this?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, for sure."
That's awesome.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Oh
So-
yeah.
So you have worked now in places like the new Dawn the Beachcombers and Lucky
Yep.
Tiki. How was it like either crafting those pieces for those bars? Did you get an image beforehand, or they just approach you? Or what was the process like to get stuff into those places?
Well, Lucky Tiki, Bobby Green just contacted me and said, "Hey, do you have any lamps available?" And I said, "Sure, I got these 3 lamps." He goes, "I'll take them." So that was pretty easy. So
Yeah.
I didn't have to do anything ahead of time. I did make him another lamp, which will be in the new. I think he's doing a new bar. I think it's at the bowling alley that he has,
Okay.
the Highland
Cool.
Park Bowl.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have ever been out there. I've never been to the Highland Park Bowl. I've been in that area before, but I've never been in the bowling alley.
Yeah. Same here.
He's got a lot of restaurants and different things going on. And Bobby's a really interesting character. He's got a lot of like vintage cars and hot rods, and he's a super cool dude. So really easy to deal with. You know what I mean? He's like, "Oh, what do you want for that?" And you just tell him, and he goes, "Boop," and then the payment shows up. So some people are like, "Well, I don't know, whatever." So for the Don the Beachcombers, I've known Danny Gallardo, Tiki Diablo, for probably since he started making mugs. So I've been buying mugs from him forever. And he's like, "Hey, do you want to make some lamps for me?" And he goes, "Sure." I said, "Sure." And this was probably in the summertime. And then I think it must have been right around, I want to say it was around September or October. And he's like, hey, I need these lamps right away. And I said, okay, I'll get them done. And then I was like, started making them. Like I was shipping a lamp every single day for like 5 days.
Yeah.
And then of course they didn't go until the following April. So they said, I think he probably thought, well, I'll tell him now that I need him and he'll get him by April or whatever. So yeah, I don't think he expected it, but he said he didn't want the burnt and scraped style lamp. He wanted like more of like an aged, like, like kind of like looked like it came out of the water, like the wood kind of like
Oh, yeah.
combed. So it was kind of a departure from what I normally do. Cause normally I like take the wood and cut the shapes into it and I burn it and scrape it off. So this, I had to use a different process. I figured out, I didn't invent it or anything, but I went online and found a process that they use to make things look like they've been out in the water, kind of a grayish look. So it's just a chemical process. It's basically like a vinegar mix, and you mix it with a steel wool. You put it in a jar, shake it up, let it sit for a couple of days, and you put it on there, and it makes it kind of gray. So it's an interesting process. Yeah. So I made all the stuff. So it looks, I know that bar is not open right now, and I think they're going to do something else with it, with that space, that Madeira space. I think, from what I hear, it was more of a, like a typical Florida beach. People wanted a bucket of beer and margaritas. So I think they're going to take all this, like the more tiki stuff, and move it into the next build.
Yeah.
This bar it's going to open back up, and none of the stuff that I built got damaged. I think they had, during that hurricane, they had a couple feet of water in there, so it did damage some things, but it didn't destroy it. And obviously the lamps were on the ceiling, so it didn't destroy it. So my hope is, A, that we'll get in the new place, and then B, I could build some more lamps for him for the next one, which is supposed to be like a pretty. I've seen the drawings. I don't know if you guys have ever seen any of that stuff, but yeah, looks amazing. So if I could have a couple lamps in there, I'd be freaked out. So sounds awesome.
Yeah, that hurricane, that was pretty nasty when I saw the photos of the standing water, and I was just, because they were only open for a couple of months.
Well, they were open for about almost a year, I think, close to it. Yeah, maybe like 9 months or 10 months or something.
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, that sounds more right. But I saw the pictures of this next place. And this next place looks pretty awesome.
Yeah, yep, all the drawings
big
and everything.
A-frame.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
that's gonna be killer. I've never been to Florida. I hope to get down there someday. So I'm kind of waiting. I was going to try to go, and then I was like, oh man, they closed. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to wait,
Right.
Yeah.
I'll wait till the next one's built, and then I'll get down there, go there, and the Mai Kai and everything else.
Yeah.
I've got a 12-year-old. So now she's about the right age to go get on all the rides, do everything. When you bring kids, we went to Disneyland twice when she was little, and it was kind of like, I mean, it's fun, but they can't make it the whole day. And, they can't go on all the rides because they're
Right.
They're only 2 feet tall or whatever they are, 2 or 3 feet tall.
Yeah.
So now she's big enough, and she'll have a great time. So yeah, hopefully we'll get back down there, go see the tiki bars, and go to Disney World and do all that, to make a big trip out of it. So
That'd be awesome.
yeah, for sure. Where else do I have lamps? Oh, I have some lamps in the local bar, Mutiny Bar. I have 3 lamps over the booth.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I have three of the shell lamps. Yep.
Wow, very cool.
Yep. So we used to have 2 tiki bars here. One was called Lost River, but they went out of business maybe 2 years ago. So now we only have the one, the Mutiny. So the bartenders from Lost River are the Dead Isla. Have you ever seen those that pop up before?
No,
they were just at Hukilau.
Okay.
They're called Dead Isla. Am I saying that right? Dead Isla or Dead?
Oh, I do know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
I couldn't pronounce any better, but I do know who you're talking about.
Yeah. So they just did a pop up there. They did a pop up at Makahiki last year.
Yeah.
So you should go to that if you're going to go to something in the Midwest. Then you could come out, take a trip to do all the other bars, and then go to that one. That's in September. So,
yeah. That's awesome.
Fun. Yeah. What's your process kind of like with the jewelry making that you're doing now?
Well, the jewelry. So the majority of the jewelry I have been sculpting out of a monster clay.
Okay.
So, and then, you make a resin mold out of it, and then you pour the jewelry. So there's that way. I do have a couple, like this little dude I don't know where it came from, but I have a friend who does, we'll see there.
Yeah.
I have a friend who does estate sales, and he gave me this, and I thought, well, that would be pretty cool to make a mold out of. So made a mold, and, I made a mold for this. These tusks, believe it or not, the cheapest I could find them online was $30 for a pair. And I thought that's just too expensive, and it's going to make the necklace cost way more than it could. So I just made a resin cast out of that too. So
Very
Cool.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you mentioned you have some events coming up. Could you say those again? Then do you have anything else on the horizon that's coming up?
well, for sure. Tiki Inferno, which is in Brownstown, Michigan, and then Makahiki is in September. I want to say I can't remember the date. I think it was like the 14th. I'd have to look at my calendar, but next weekend is Tiki Inferno. That's in Brownstown, and then the Makahiki is obviously in Indianapolis. So we'll see whatever. There's a couple other local events too. I'd like to do the further away events, but it's so far from Detroit to go anywhere.
Yeah.
It's a good day and a half to drive to down to Florida. So I did have some necklaces at Hukilau. My friends from Mahalo Max and Castaway Grotto had a table, and they put some of my stuff on there and sold quite a few
Nice.
Oh, that's
necklaces
cool.
for me. Yeah. So they asked me to say, "Hey, can you send some stuff?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. If you want to sell it for me, I don't have a problem with that." So
Right.
Yeah.
and then I'll have some items, just jewelry at Ohana at the High Water Hideaway booth. So it's
Great.
kind of a little group. They're trying to like bring in some people. Obviously, you can't show up to do a whole booth. They're going to bring in some different vendors to put some of their stuff there, so get some exposure for everybody.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So where can people find you to take a look at the art that you make, or maybe even buy some pieces?
You can look at me on Tikis by Savage Matt on Instagram, and that's really it. I mean, if you see anything you like, just shoot me a message. I don't really sell online. I didn't really want to. I'd rather just sell in person. You know what I mean? Because to me, it's like about meeting people and talking to
Yeah.
people, and
Yeah.
and I don't mind selling it online or building stuff for people online. Oop, what's going on here? Oh, something popped up. I don't mind doing it online, but I much prefer to do it in person. I think it's a lot more fun.
Yeah.
So
Meeting people in person, that
Yeah.
personable factor is so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah,
our
absolutely.
goal is to try to make it to Tiki Oasis this year, just to go out there. I'm gonna have a lamp in the lamp art show again.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
That for the last 2 years. Yep.
Well, if you're out there, we'll see you there. We'll say
Okay.
hi. Yeah, we're gonna go back to our old stomping ground for a couple of days and
Oh, nice.
the whole
Nice.
thing.
It'll be
Yep.
our first time at Tiki Oasis.
Yeah,
So we're really
awesome.
looking forward to it.
Even though we lived in San Diego for a couple of years, something always came up.
Yeah. Oh, you never made it?
No.
No,
Well, I've never made it either. I mean, I was always doing the rockabilly event, and now it's kind of
Uh-huh.
like, okay, I really want to get out there and do it. So
Yeah.
it's either gonna be this year or next year. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
That'll be
So,
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
Well, awesome. We really appreciate you sitting down with us. And again, everyone, go check out Matt on Instagram. If you see anything you like, just hit him up. And again, thank you for sitting down with us and taking the time.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right. Aloha, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again to Ed Hamilton and Matt Strickland for joining us on this week's episode. We had an absolute pleasure speaking with you both and chronicling your stories throughout the Tiki Revival period and into today. You can find Ed at theministryofrum.com. Like he said during the interview, the website's down right now as they are transitioning to an updated platform. But be sure to keep a lookout for it so that you can see his catalog of rum history and be able to get in contact with him again in the future. You can also get a chance to chat with Ed on his weekly Zoom call. I think it's, Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern?
7 or 8, but he publishes it on his Instagram with the Zoom login, all the other information you need to get a hold of him.
Perfect. So we'll have that information down in the show notes as well as his Instagram as well.
Yeah, and huge shout out to Matt Strickland. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. If you're listening to this on the day it comes out, which is Friday, June 13th, tomorrow on the 14th of June, Matt will be vending Tiki Inferno up in Michigan. So if you're in the area, make sure you go check him out, see what he has for sale, hopefully pick up a few things. But if you need a little bit more lead time, Matt will also be at Makahiki in Indianapolis this coming September. So if you are planning to go out for an event, try to hopefully make it out to that and tell Matt hi.
You can find Matt on Instagram at tikis_by_savage_Matt. And of course, that will be linked down in the show notes as well.
Yeah, and I just have one more thing to say. Usually we try to keep the show very concise, but this week in the music world, we lost an absolute legend. I've mentioned him a couple of times on this show, but we lost Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. Anyone who's been listening or who has met me in person knows how much the Beach Boys mean to me. This is one of the very few celebrity losses that really, really just cuts deep. Brian has written music for the last 60 years. He meant so much, I'm sure, to all of us, influenced countless and countless musicians, bands. He has influences even in the tiki scene, whether that's directly via the surf scene or maybe in other ways. Losing Brian Wilson is definitely going to be hard. I'm sure a lot of you out there are feeling the same loss that I do. So, like Brian says, or should say, that as he said, love and mercy to you all.
You can find us on Instagram at the Tiki Talk Show or Kona Cove _home tiki bar. You can also send us an email at thetikitalkshow@gmail.com if you'd like to be interviewed as our main guest or an artist spotlight.
Make sure you connect with us via Facebook. We have a lot of cool things coming up here soon. Quick little development. We have some buttons and postcards that we have in now. So if you want one of those, go on Facebook or Instagram. You can look up the Tiki Talk Show. You'll find us there. Just shoot us a message. Make sure when you're filling out the Facebook group, answer all the questions. We'll add you in, and we'll hopefully have something out to you here shortly.
Yes, we now have a Google form where you can fill out with your address and get on our postcard mailing list. We've had an absolute blast creating these postcards, and they're just the few starters of many to come. So that'll be linked down in the show notes as well. If you'd like to receive postcards from us, just go ahead and fill that out with your name and address.
All right, aloha everyone. It was great talking to you.
Bye.